All right, so a few years ago, right, my husband and I stayed at this bed and breakfast in like, I think it was Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We went to do some filming for our network, and instead of finding a hotel, I found this like amazing bed and breakfast, and I'm like, yo, we have to stay there because the reviews were just like insane. Like it was just fives all across, and I'm like, I've never seen that before, so let me go ahead and book this bed and breakfast and see what all the fuss is about. Right? And overall, I just had a really good feeling about it, right? Like we pull up, it's like 11 o'clock at night. I knock on the door and we get in, and next day we wake up, and I mean, they literally made us breakfast, like, you know, like a bed and breakfast. So we go downstairs for breakfast, and we're walking through the house, and you know, it's like just really just so quaint and just so peaceful. We go to breakfast, we sit down, and there are 3 other couples in the room. We're the only Black couple. Now, I say that because it's important to this story, right? I'm not just pointing out race for no reason. I say that because it's important to this story. So we sit and we're talking, and we're just having a good time, okay? Like we're chopping it up. You would have sworn we knew these people for a long time. So anyway, we spent most of our day there before we drove back to New York, just really just talking and just enjoying food. One of the couples left because once we started talking about Jesus, they was out, okay? So after we exchanged numbers, we went back to New York. The next day I go to church, and I'm telling my pastor, I'm like, oh my gosh, we stayed at this amazing bed and breakfast. Like, you have to go check it out. Like, I'm raving about this bed and breakfast and the time that we had. I say to my pastor, we were the only Black people in the room. And he says, Dominique, you got to be careful with that. And as he said that, I knew that I said something wrong. Not because it offended him, and not that he was even offended, but because it was wrong. But you see, at that time, I knew that something was off, but I didn't understand at that time why it was off. And so years later, I always thought about his response to me pointing out that my husband and I were the only Black people in the room. Years later, I thought about that, and I had to ask myself this question. Why did it matter? Why did I have to point out the fact that we were the only Black people in the room? You see, we weren't mistreated. We weren't looked down on. We weren't talked down to. No one pointed out the fact that we were Black. No one made any references to skin color. Nowhere. No one changed their accent. No one changed their voice. No one tried to be hood. No one tried to be Black. Race never came up in the room. Not once. Not from them and not from us. But for some reason, I felt it necessary to take notice of the fact of all of the wonderful things I had to say. For some reason, I felt the need to point out the fact that we were the only Black people in the room. I'm sharing this because I had to ask a question as I'm thinking back on this moment, this situation. Is it possible that you've made race the elephant in the room when it's really an ant that no one notices but you? Could you be robbing yourself of meaningful relationships with people who don't look like you because you make it all about the fact that they don't look like you?